Good morning, everybody, and thanks for watching. So, Christians and religious people, if you ask them if God is sovereign, most would say yes. But it's a limited sovereignty. It's a sovereignty that is dependent on what they do. So, a limited sovereignty or a sovereignty that's dependent on what the human does is not sovereignty at all. So, what they say is, like, if you have this coffee mug, and in the coffee mug is God's realm of sovereignty, you have to step in or jump into that coffee mug in order for God to be sovereign in your life. If you stay out here, then God is not sovereign in your life. Otherwise, if you choose evil or you choose not to believe in Jesus Christ or you don't follow certain laws in whatever religion it is, then God is not in control of that. You chose to be outside of his sovereignty. But if you choose to be outside of his sovereignty and have to step into his realm of sovereignty, then he's not sovereign at all. Sovereignty is not contingent upon what a person does, but that's what Christianity and all of religion believes. Most religions, some religions don't even believe that God is sovereign at all, that he just created creation and then went off on his own and is just sitting around watching in a hands-off approach on his creation. But most would say that God is sovereign, but they say he's only sovereign if you step within his plan or his will, which isn't sovereignty at all. So, in essence, what the Christian says is you have to step into that circle of control. You have to make yourself right by choosing Christ or following certain laws. But if you don't do that, then what Jesus did for you, or his sovereignty, God's sovereignty, and the gift that he gives us through Jesus Christ doesn't apply. So the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 5 really goes through the human thinking and then gives the revelation that he got from the glorified Jesus Christ. And again, I'm going through different things in Paul that just show that what he wrote about in these letters is a direct revelation from the glorified Jesus Christ, because no human being would come up with this. I mean, you look at Paul's 13 letters, they're letters to real people. If he was making up a religion or he was just trying to make a name for himself, he wouldn't include a lot of the things that he included in these letters. One is just their truths that are beyond human understanding, because most humans don't even understand them. And if you do understand them, it's not something you could ever come up with. Two is he exposed everything. Why would you, if you just want to make a name for yourself, would you include the sins of the very people that you are saying are righteous based on Jesus Christ in your letters? For example, like I talked about last time, the man, the Corinthian, who was nailing his stepmom. Why would you include that in the letter? Well, you'd include that in the letter because you're writing to people and dealing with real stuff, real people, real sin. And you get that throughout all of Paul's letters. There were letters to real people. He was dealing with this stuff. He wasn't creating a religion or having an allegory or creating some weird story like a lot of religions are. He was writing letters to specific groups of people that had names, that were real, that had conflict, that had sin. There's nothing more real than Paul's letters. Nothing. and he got it from the glorified Jesus Christ. If we look at chapter 5 of Romans, starting in verse 6, for Christ, while we are still infirm, still in accord with the era, for the sake of the irreverent died. For hardly for the sake of a just man will anyone be dying. So here Paul's saying that human beings, maybe for a just man, would die. So he's talking about what human beings would do. Okay, if it was a just man, a good man, maybe someone would die for that man. Us today, I believe I'd die for my children. Most of us would die for our sons and daughters, for those close to us. I think we at least would say that we would, and we believe that we would. So perhaps for a good man, Paul is saying here, some would die. Yet God, so now he's revealing what God, through the glorified Jesus Christ, revealed to him. So that's what humans would do. Now this is what God would do. And it's not what a human would do. Yet God is commending this love of his to us, seeing that while we are still sinners, Christ died for our sakes. Much rather than being now justified in his blood, we shall be saved from indignation through him. For if, being enemies, we were conciliated to God through the death of his Son, much rather, being conciliated, we shall be saved in his life. So here Paul is telling us that we were conciliated to God by Jesus Christ while we were enemies. So the human perspective is, yeah, you might die for a friend or a good man or your children. But what Paul is saying is that God, through Jesus Christ and what Jesus Christ did, conciliated us, made peace with God by the work of Jesus Christ while we were enemies. So not for a good man, not for your children, not for someone who's doing something righteous. He died for the irreverent. And while we were sinners, while we were enemies, not because we made a choice or we followed certain rules in order to step into the realm of sovereignty, to step into and earn what Jesus Christ has done for us. It was done for us when we were far away, when we were the opposite, when we were unworthy, while we were enemies. All of religion tells us that you have to turn from being enemies and stop sinning long enough in order to do something right, in order to gain what Jesus Christ has done for you. But it was done for you and completed. The conciliation was complete. God was at peace with you while you were an enemy. The peace didn't come on you when you repented or turned to Jesus Christ and then God gave it to you. No, it was done while you were irreverent, while you're sinners, while we're enemies. That's what Paul's saying here. And that's when Christ died for us. He died for us as we were enemies, as we were irreverent, as we were sinners. Not like the humans do, normal humans do, which is maybe they'll die for someone who's close to them, their children, or for a just man. Jesus Christ died for the unjust, the sinners, the irreverent, the enemies. And that was when we were conciliated. That's when God was at peace with us because of what Jesus Christ did, not because we turned at some point to earn what he did. It was while we were enemies. That's what Paul's saying here. And this is totally against what any human being would do. He lists first what the human would do, and then he lists what God would do, or what God did. So you look at the Apostle Paul. Look at Saul of Tarsus. When he was 4 years old, when Saul of Tarsus was 4 years old, or 10 years old, 12 years old, however old he was when he started dragging people who believed in Jesus Christ out of their house and putting them in jail or murdering people who believed in Jesus Christ. When he was watching the coats of the Pharisees that were stoning Stephen to death, did God have control of his life then? Was God sovereign in Saul's life at that point? What about David? King David, when he was having sex with Bathsheba, a married woman, and actually had her husband Uriah killed, was God sovereign? Did he have any control over David at that point? What about Peter when he was denying him? Jesus said, "You're going to deny me." Was Peter free to do anything else? Did God have sovereignty over these individuals before